Chapter 1. The Canyon, Blue John Canyon, a narrow crack in the earth hidden deep inside Utah's Canyonlands National Park, doesn't look like much on a map. Just another winding crease in the desert, another shadow line between red rock and sand. But for those who know the American Southwest, Blue John is infamous, a place both magnificent and merciless. In the spring of 2003, this canyon would become the stage for one of the most harrowing survival stories ever told. Here, a man would stand alone against stone, thirst, and time itself. That man's name was Aron Ralston. Ralston wasn't the type to stumble into danger by accident. At 27 years old, he had already made a choice that few young professionals would dare to make. He walked away from a promising career in engineering. After graduating from Carnegie Mellon University and taking a job at Intel, he quit the security of a steady paycheck and a climate-controlled office for a life of risk and wilderness. Why? Because Aron believed that the wild offered something the modern world could not. Out there, in the silence of canyons and the sharp air of mountain peaks, life felt stripped down to essentials. Every climb, every step was a test. Every mistake carried consequences. In that unforgiving simplicity, Aron felt most alive. On Friday, April 25, 2003, he packed lightly: water, a couple snacks, climbing gear, a cheap multi-tool, and a video camera. He didn't bother to tell anyone where he was going, a habit of independence that would soon prove fatal. His plan was simple: spend a few hours exploring, be back at his truck by nightfall. The desert morning was clear and bright. Aron parked his blue pickup at the canyon's trailhead and began walking. The sun rose higher, painting the red cliffs with streaks of fire. As he moved deeper into Blue John, the walls closed in around him. The air grew cooler, shadows thicker. He loved that sense of being swallowed by stone, as if the earth itself were testing him. Narrow slots twisted ahead, some so tight he had to turn sideways to slip through. The canyon seemed alive, breathing him deeper into its maze. To many, this place would have felt claustrophobic, hostile. To Aron, it was exactly where he belonged. What he didn't know was that the canyon had its own plan, and soon stone would close around him in a way he could never have imagined. Chapter 2. The Mistake. By mid-afternoon, the canyon had grown darker. The walls towered higher, shutting out the sun. Aron moved with practiced ease, dropping into pits, scrambling over boulders, trusting the instincts honed from years of climbing. At about 2:45 p.m., he reached a section where a massive boulder was wedged above the canyon floor. Rocks like this are common in slot canyons, often serving as natural steps. Aron, confident as always, didn't hesitate. He placed his foot on the stone, shifted his weight, and started down. Then it happened. The boulder moved. In an instant, a rock weighing nearly 800 pounds broke free. Aron fell with it, crashing into the narrow slot. He barely had time to throw up his hands before the stone pinned him against the wall. When the dust cleared, he was upright, but his right arm was trapped, crushed between rock and canyon wall. The pain was white-hot, searing through his body. He yanked, twisted, shoved with his legs. The stone didn't budge. It was as if the canyon itself had clenched its fist around him. He tried again. Nothing. Ralston froze. He was alone in one of the most remote corners of Utah. He had told no one his plans. There was no cell phone service, no chance of a passerby. His water bottle was half empty. His food would last a day at best. And his arm was going nowhere. The realization settled over him like ice. If I don't get free, this canyon will become my grave. Aron leaned back against the wall, breathing hard. He was an engineer by training, a problem solver by nature. And now, staring at the immovable stone, he understood that his biggest problem had just begun. Chapter 3. Prisoner of Stone. The first hours passed in a blur of shock and pain. Aron pushed, pulled, cursed, and pleaded with the canyon. He tried using his climbing rope as a lever, wedging carabiners under the boulder, even chipping at the rock with his cheap multi-tool. Nothing worked. The boulder might as well have been welded into the canyon wall. By nightfall, the desert air grew cold. The heat of the day drained away, leaving him shivering. Trapped in the slot, he could see only a narrow strip of sky far above, streaked with fading stars. He shifted his weight, but the stone pressed on. His right hand was already swelling, turning numb and pale. He rationed his water, sipping only a few drops at a time. His food, a couple of granola bars and some dried fruit, would not last long. He chewed slowly, stretching each bite into minutes of distraction. The silence was relentless. No voices, no footsteps, no rescue. Aron realized with crushing certainty. No one even knew he was here. He had told no one of his plans. The world might as well have forgotten him. To keep himself sane, he began recording messages on his video camera. He spoke to his parents, his friends, to no one and everyone. The lens caught a young man's face, hollowed by fear yet steadied by determination. His words were half journal, half farewell. On the second day, his water was nearly gone. He forced himself to drink his own urine, warm and bitter, but enough to keep him alive. His lips cracked, his tongue swelled. The desert sun baked the canyon during the day, only to hand him over to freezing winds at night. Time blurred. Hours felt like days, days like weeks. Pain pulsed through his trapped arm, sometimes sharp, sometimes dull, but always there, reminding him that the stone would not relent. By the third day, Aron's mind began to drift. He saw flashes, hallucinations of friends, of laughter, of wide-open spaces. The canyon walls seemed to close in, pressing not just on his arm but on his spirit. Yet deep inside, a single thought held firm. I am not ready to die here. Chapter 4. The decision. By the third night, Aron knew the truth. The boulder wasn't moving. No rope trick, no tool, no desperate shove would free his hand. He had entered a battle he could not win by force. Dehydration gnawed at him. His mouth was dry to the point of cracking. His thoughts came slower now, heavy and sluggish, like stones sinking through water. And yet, one idea kept surfacing, frightening, unthinkable. The only way out is to leave the arm behind. At first, he rejected it outright. Amputate his own arm? With what? A cheap multi-tool, its blade dulled from years of use? The thought was madness. He tested it anyway, pressing the blade against his skin. Cut but shallow, barely enough to scratch. The real obstacle wasn't flesh, it was bone. On the fourth day, Aron's recordings turned darker. He spoke into the camera, his voice hoarse, eyes hollow. He told his family he loved them. He apologized for mistakes. He began to say goodbye. But the canyon gave him no peace. His trapped arm grew stiff, lifeless, almost no longer part of him. He prodded it and felt nothing below the elbow. The arm was already gone, in a way. On the morning of the fifth day, delirious and weak, Aron had a breakthrough. He realized he didn't need to cut through the bones. He could break them. Using the boulder as leverage and adding his body weight, he broke the bone in his arm. White-hot pain ripped through him, but also a wave of clarity. Now, the knife could do its work. Aron set to the grisly task of freeing himself. He, gritting his teeth, with great difficulty cut off the remaining soft tissues of the hand. The canyon was silent, save for his labored breathing. When at last he was free, he stumbled backward, gasping. His right arm was gone, left behind beneath the boulder. He fashioned a tourniquet from his climbing gear to stop the bleeding. The date was April 30th, 2003. The dawn sun lit the canyon walls. Aron Ralston had sacrificed his arm, but he had gained something greater, the chance to live. Chapter 5. The escape. The canyon was quiet, almost eerily so, as Aron staggered forward. His right sleeve hung empty, tied tightly above the stump. Blood seeped through the fabric, but the tourniquet held, for now. The world looked different. The walls of Blue John Canyon glowed in the morning light, streaked with reds and oranges, as if they were alive, watching him. Aron was weak, but every breath, every step felt like defiance. He had chosen life, and now he had to fight for it. The immediate challenge lay just ahead, the rappel. To leave the canyon, he had to descend a 65-foot drop he had once navigated with two strong arms. Now, with only one, the rope seemed impossibly thin, the descent impossibly far. He anchored his rope, tested the knot, and took a breath that shook his whole body. Then, gripping the rope with his left hand and bracing his feet against the sandstone, he began to lower himself. Every movement burned. His body screamed for rest, but the thought of collapsing here, so close to freedom, drove him downward. When his feet finally touched solid ground, he let out a sob, half joy, half exhaustion. But the ordeal wasn't over. Ahead stretched miles of desert, dry and merciless. His water was gone, his body dehydrated, his energy nearly spent. Still, he kept moving. He stumbled across the canyon floor, weaving between slick rock domes and sandy washes. The sun climbed higher, its heat brutal. Aron's lips cracked, his tongue felt like sandpaper. He thought often of his family, of the simple, beautiful things he still longed for. A glass of cold water, his mother's cooking, the sound of laughter with friends. Hours passed in a haze of pain and determination. Then, as if placed by fate, he saw it. A small pool of water, rain-fed and muddy. He dropped to his knees and drank greedily, uncaring of the taste or the grit. Each swallow revived him, just enough to keep going. By afternoon, Aron was barely conscious, staggering on legs that felt like wood. And then, through the shimmer of heat, he saw movement, 3 figures in the distance. A family of hikers, tourists from the Netherlands, out for a day's adventure. They froze when they saw him. A gaunt, sunburned man, his arm gone, blood dried across his shirt. For a moment, they thought he was a ghost. Then they rushed to him, offering water, food, comfort. Through cracked lips, Aron managed a hoarse whisper. "I'm Aron, trapped. 5 days, please." The family moved quickly. One stayed with him, pressing cloth to his wound, while another ran to alert rescuers. And then, the sound Aron had dreamed of in his darkest hours reached his ears, the distant thump of helicopter blades. The desert, which had nearly taken his life, was now delivering salvation. Chapter 6. The Rescue. The sound of rotor blades echoed through the canyon like a promise. Aron lifted his head, though it felt as heavy as stone, and saw the helicopter crest the horizon. The orange and white craft glinted in the sun, a stark contrast against the sandstone walls. For 5.5 days he had been sealed in silence, save for his own voice on the camera and the whisper of the wind through stone. Now came noise, movement, life. The Dutch family waved frantically at the chopper, pointing toward the man slumped in the sand. The pilot circled once, scanning the terrain, then descended. Dust and grit whipped into the air, stinging Aron's face, but he welcomed the sting. It was the feel of rescue. 2 paramedics jumped out, crouching low beneath the blades. One knelt at his side, pressing fingers to his pulse, the other immediately working to stabilize the tourniquet and cover the wound. "Stay with us, Aron," a medic shouted over the roar. "You're safe now. We've got you." Aron tried to respond, but his lips were too dry, his throat raw. All he managed was a nod, a faint whisper of breath. They lifted him onto a stretcher, strapped him in, and carried him toward the helicopter. Every bump, every jolt sent fresh waves of pain through his body, but it didn't matter anymore. The canyon was behind him. As the helicopter rose, Aron caught one last glimpse of Blue John. From above, the slot canyon looked almost beautiful, serpentine walls carved by eons of wind and water. He thought about how it had nearly been his grave, and how it would forever be a part of his story. Inside the chopper, the medics hooked him up to fluids, checked his vitals, and radioed ahead to the hospital. Aron's eyes fluttered open and shut, drifting in and out of consciousness. He remembered flashes. The paramedics' reassuring hand on his shoulder, the dry crackle of the headset as they called in his condition, the sight of the desert stretching endlessly beneath them. When they landed in Moab, emergency crews rushed him inside. Doctors surrounded him, voices overlapping. Blood loss, infection risk, surgery prep. But as the anesthetic washed over him, Aron felt only one emotion: relief. Relief that he had chosen life, that he had endured the impossible, and that somehow, against every odd, he was alive. Chapter 7. Recovery and Return. Aron woke in the hospital surrounded by white light and antiseptic smells. For a moment he couldn't tell if he was alive or dreaming. Then came the pain, a deep, pulsing ache in his right arm or what was left of it. Doctors moved quickly to stabilize him. They cleaned the wound, treated the infection risk, and transfused precious blood back into his system. When Aron finally became lucid enough to speak, he asked about his family. Word traveled fast. His parents arrived within hours, their faces etched with fear and relief in equal measure. His mother took his hand, the only hand left, and whispered, "You're here. That's all that matters." The days that followed were a blur of surgeries, checkups, and pain management. Nurses monitored his vitals. Physical therapists began gentle exercises, preparing him for the road ahead. Each morning Aron stared at the bandaged stump of his arm. Sometimes he felt phantom fingers twitching, sometimes a searing pain as if the hand were still trapped beneath the boulder. But alongside the grief came gratitude. He was alive. He had walked out of the canyon under his own strength. That thought became his anchor. When the media caught wind of his survival, reporters flooded the hospital lobby. Headlines across America, and soon the world, declared his story. Man trapped by boulder amputates own arm to survive. Aron reluctantly agreed to interviews, though he was still weak. He spoke softly, his voice carrying both humility and conviction. "I didn't beat the canyon. I made a choice to keep living." Recovery wasn't just physical. Mentally, he had to confront the trauma. The memories of the boulder, the smell of dust, the sound of his own bones breaking. Therapists worked with him, but Aron also relied on his own determination. He wrote down everything he could remember, reliving the ordeal on paper as a way to process it. Within months, he was back on his feet, literally climbing again. With a prosthetic attachment designed for gripping rock, Aron scaled cliffs that most people with two arms would hesitate to attempt. Friends who had expected him to retreat from danger instead watched him push harder, fueled by a sense of unfinished business. Then came the book. In 2004, he released Between a Rock and a Hard Place, a raw, unfiltered account of those 6 days. It wasn't just a survival manual. It was a meditation on risk, freedom, and the choices we make when life narrows to a single moment. The book became a bestseller, translated into dozens of languages, and Aron found himself on talk shows, university stages, and corporate conferences, sharing the lessons he had carved from stone with people from all walks of life. 6 years later, Hollywood came calling. Director Danny Boyle, known for his kinetic storytelling, saw in Aron's ordeal a universal tale of endurance and willpower. James Franco was cast as Aron, and in 2010 the film 127 Hours premiered. It captured not just the mechanics of survival, but the inner journey, the hallucinations, the despair, the final, desperate act of liberation. The movie earned 6 Academy Award nominations and brought Aron's story to millions who had never set foot in Utah. Through it all, Aron never let himself become just the guy who cut off his arm. He returned to the mountains, to skiing, to rafting. He used his platform to advocate for wilderness safety, encouraging adventurers to leave itineraries, to carry satellite beacons, to respect the land's dangers. He also spoke about resilience, the kind that extends beyond cliffs and canyons. His message resonated with cancer survivors, wounded veterans, people struggling with addiction, and anyone who had faced their own version of the boulder. By the time he stood on stages across America, holding up his prosthetic arm as a symbol, Aron's story had transcended the canyon. It wasn't just about one man against a rock. It was about the human will to choose life, even when every option seems stripped away. Chapter 8. Legacy. The story of Aron Ralston did not end in that canyon. It grew, rippling outward, carried in newspaper headlines, in books, in the whispered retelling around campfires and classrooms. What he endured became more than a survival tale. It became a parable about choice, willpower, and the fragile strength of human life. In the years that followed, people often asked him, "How did you do it? How did you find the courage to cut off your own arm? Aron's answer was both simple and profound. It wasn't courage. It was the will to live. I wanted to go home. That distinction mattered. For him, it was never about heroism or proving toughness. It was about something elemental, the same instinct that has driven humans through fire, famine, and flood. He stripped survival down to its core. The decision to move forward, no matter the cost. His story inspired climbers and hikers, yes, but also people far from the wilderness. Cancer survivors wrote to him saying that when chemotherapy seemed unbearable, they thought of his 5 days trapped and found strength to continue. Soldiers recovering from battlefield injuries looked at Aron's prosthetic arm and saw proof that life could still hold adventure, even joy. Teachers used his book in classrooms, asking students to consider what they might do when faced with impossible odds. Hollywood's 127 Hours ensured that his ordeal would never fade into obscurity. The film did more than dramatize a survival epic. It invited audiences to imagine themselves in that narrow canyon, forced to confront mortality and meaning. For many, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that life is fragile and that each day deserves attention and gratitude. But Aron himself resisted being frozen in that one story. He returned to mountains, summiting peaks with one hand. He skied backcountry slopes, rafted whitewater rivers, and built a life filled with adventure rather than absence. When people saw him climbing sheer cliffs, prosthetic hook digging into cracks, they realized his survival wasn't just about cutting free from the boulder. It was about refusing to let that moment define the rest of his days. There was also a quieter legacy. He spoke openly about the mistakes he had made, the decision not to tell anyone his route, the lack of proper communication equipment. By sharing those lessons, he saved lives, persuading countless outdoor enthusiasts to carry emergency beacons, to leave trip plans, to respect the unpredictable power of nature. His suffering became instruction. His loss became prevention for others. And yet, perhaps the most enduring part of Aron's legacy was not about mountains or safety checklists. It was about perspective. He often told audiences, "Every single one of us will face our boulder. It may not be made of rock. It may be a diagnosis, a loss, a crisis. What matters is how we choose to respond." That truth gave his story universality. A man pinned in a canyon became a mirror for anyone trapped by circumstances beyond control. His struggle reminded people that even in darkness, a choice exists, that surrender is not the only path. Today, when visitors hike into Blue John Canyon, they sometimes pause at the narrow slot where the great boulder still sits. Some leave notes, some simply stand in silence. The stone is immovable, unremarkable to the unknowing eye. But to those who understand, it is not just a rock. It is a monument to the resilience of the human spirit. Aron Ralston's journey remains etched in the annals of survival literature, alongside Shackleton, Zamperini, and Kepke. But unlike tales of shipwrecks or war, his was the struggle of one man in solitude, facing a choice no one else could make for him. He walked out of that canyon diminished in body but enlarged in spirit. And that is his true legacy. A reminder that while life can strip away everything, comfort, safety, even limb, it cannot extinguish the spark that drives us forward. Between the rock and the hard place, Aron Ralston chose life. And in doing so, he gave the rest of us a story to carry when we meet our own stones.